Sons of a Pitch, an American soccer podcast. And now, as we get ready to conclude with our third and final team preview, one of my favorite Western Conference teams. You heard one of my old favorites in Columbus in the East, but Sporting Kansas City and the Kansas City franchise has been one of my favorites since their inception as the Wiz back in the day. Again, some of the best uniforms too, I think, in the history of the league. So we gotta recognize that as well. But Sporting Kansas City has made some moves. They were our pick last season to win a trophy, to win the league, and really just could not get over the CCL hangover, as well as overcome massive amounts of injuries. So we'll see how they're going to fare better. And to kind of offset some of those injuries and kind of bolster their roster a little bit, they brought in goalkeeper Richard Sanchez on the re-entry draft. To me, this is a pure depth move. Having watched him play here in Chicago, having watched him struggle here in Chicago to be a consistent goalkeeper and to play at an MLS starting capability, this is clearly just a depth move. Someone who can back up Melia because he has starting experience in the MLS. I don't see him being part of whatever it is they're building for the future or whatever successes they are going to have within the next season or two. So he's just a reliable backup, and then I'd like to see them develop a new goalkeeper. As far as other players coming in, they brought in Roberto Puncek, a defender on a free transfer. They got Kyrie Shelton, who comes in on a free transfer, as well as Amadou Dia, a defender on a free transfer. So always making good business moves, Sporting Kansas City. Some of the other names to talk about, midfielder Gadi Kinda, who is on loan from the Israeli league, Beitar Jerusalem. This guy has a very high ceiling and can impact the offense immediately. I've always been a little bit wary about players coming in from some of these middle to lower tier European leagues, like the Turkish league, like the Israeli league, the Russian league, the Polish league. But he could be an excellent fit for the MLS, and so we'll have to keep an eye on him. He could be the next big thing out of Kansas City. But the biggest player that they brought in, last but not least, Alan Pulido, who comes in from Chivas Guadalajara in Liga MX. This was like their coup of signings this offseason. To have Pulido end up at Kansas City over Chicago, over some of the other Western Conference teams that had been rumored to be linked with him. Like, this was a huge coup for Kansas City to pull this off. I mean, we hear about it in American sports. Like, well, why would anyone go to Chicago when they can go play in Miami or LA? Or why would anyone end up in the Twin Cities in Minneapolis when you can go play in New York? Why would anyone go to Kansas City when you can play for big soccer cities like New York or even a Miami if they were interested, or the LA squads or anywhere else? This is a huge signing for Kansas City, and a lot of people are saying it solves their need for a goal-scoring striker. They've kind of had to do things by committee, and they haven't really had that consistent top goal scorer, that 10-goal per season guy. Pulido could do that and completely change their offense. Mike, what do you think about these guys they brought in? Are you as excited as I am to talk about this? Like, I don't know if you caught that in there. Like, Kansas City with an offense? This is insane.
Well, right. That's something we haven't said for a while. So definitely excited about Alan Pulido. I think that's a great signing. I think the type of play that he is really fits Vermees' system well. And I expect some big things out of Pulido for sure. Yeah, I mean, some of the other signings as well, you know, getting Kyrie Shelton back, it's a little bit of depth. The Bundesliga 2 didn't work out for him. He's not a superstar. He's not going to get a bunch of accolades, but he's a decent depth piece here in MLS. Gadi Kinda, he's, from everything that I've read about him, sounds like a great piece. As well as some of these other guys, Roberto Puncic, Amadou Dia, definitely guys that can make an impact on this team. But yeah, they've got an offense now with Alan Pulido. Listen, they had some offense over the last season or so. They kind of had the transition has really changed with them. It used to be such a stout defense and really had no offense other than like Dom Dwyer, and that was about it. And then
that's going back like at least 5 seasons.
Yeah, and now it's kind of switched over where they had a good offense last year with Johnny Russell, Felipe Gutierrez, some of these other guys, and now they're kind of lacking a little bit on the defense. They lost Opara, but and Zusi's getting older, Beasler's getting older, those normal stalwarts in the back. But yeah, they've got an offense that's definitely going to help, and I like the moves. Some of the players out for Sporting Kansas City, Jimmy Madronda got picked up in the expansion draft. Defensive slash midfielder. You've got goalkeeper Adrian Zenadejas was traded to Nashville. Sesanovic had his option declined. Benny Feilhaber as well. Gideon Zalalem, who ended up over at New York City. Christian Nemeth out of contract. Nicholas Hasler, the old TFC guy, he's out of contract as well. And Rodney Wallace, the old Costa Rican international who played for New York City, he's out of contract as well. So lots of movement from Sporting Kansas City's perspective. But I like they're in better than they're out. They didn't lose a ton of talent on the way out, and they did bring in a good amount of talent on the way in.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to look at a talent perspective, that's one thing. But from just a name recognition perspective, Seth Sinobic, Benny Feilhaber, Christian Nemeth, like these have been staples of the Kansas City lineup for the last several seasons. I can only imagine as an SKC fan, like how you're feeling watching these guys have their options decline. Maybe they're brought back under different deals. Maybe there's something that the MLS website has left out that we need some of our listeners at home to kind of remind us that no, they're back. They signed another 2-year deal at a more club friendly rate. So maybe we do get to continue to see Feilhaber put on the I don't even know what colors you would say. I'm just thinking of like the Argyle pattern right now for SKC to put on Sporting Kansas City blue one more time. To see Christian Nemeth come back and maybe bag a couple in a supporting role. But you're right, just based on what the transfer tracker and MLS Soccer has given us here, it has kind of been a shock to see some of these kind of well-known Sporting Kansas City players not have their options decline, not be able to get the deal done. But I will tell you this. I think Sporting Kansas City has earned the benefit of the doubt from the business side of things. They usually don't hang on to players any longer than they should. And they just unfortunately haven't been able to be as good at scouting younger players to bring in and develop as they have about letting a player go before he either flames out or gets a little too old for the league. So I'll give Sporting Kansas City the benefit of the doubt. But if they can't get it done this year, there's going to be a lot of questions asked of Peter Vermees, who he's the sporting director and the coach as well, and the manager.
Right.
I think you even put some notes about that, Mike, about this is kind of Vermees' last chance to prove himself, huh?
Yeah, it's and this is what happens. I kind of want to touch on some of the players out for a second. This is what happens when you have a year when you end up with 38 points over the season, a 1.12 points per game average, a goal differential of -18. Look, they had CONCACAF Champions League. That didn't help. That gave them some extra fatigue, caused a lot of injuries. They had a lot of injuries, understood. But when that happens and you finish at the bottom, you got to make some changes. You can't stick with the same team and expect to go back to what you were. It's not how it works in sports. It's not, especially not how it works with a salary cap tied league like MLS. So you got to move on from some of those names. And as far as Peter Vermees goes, look, it's time for him. You can't have 2 bad seasons. 2 bad seasons. It's, this team really hasn't won a lot of hardware outside of a U.S. Open Cup, in a while. So you can't. This guy's not going to last through another bad season. Now, and when I say bad season, that means miss the playoffs really bad like they did last season. If they barely miss the playoffs at the end of the year, maybe he gets another shot. But I think it could be towards the end of his tenure if things don't turn around for them as of this season. So with that being said, let's get into the designated player review here. So 3 spots. First up, Felipe Gutierrez, 29-year-old midfielder, a former Chilean international, 12 goals and 3 assists last season. Had a really solid season. He's got the pedigree for a DP. He played in the Netherlands, played in La Liga, played in Brazil. He's definitely been around some of the bigger leagues. So 12 goals and 3 assists. This guy's more of a, he is a midfielder, but he's kind of more of a striker than a midfielder. He's going to score more goals and he's going to distribute the ball. So that kind of puts him into that striker category, although he plays in the midfield. Alan Pulido, who we just talked about in the second spot, 28-year-old striker, just transferred from Chivas an 8.5 or 10 million. And I can't remember what it was. It was large transfer fee.
Right.
Transfer market had him at 4.5 million pounds and listed the transfer fee for Sporting Kansas City at 10.8 million. So did they overpay there? Possibly. But I think that can be made up with jersey sales and not really tickets, because that team is always selling tickets. That's a great atmosphere. They've got a good season ticket base. They don't have to worry, but they're not going to sell more tickets because of this guy. But definitely sell more jerseys. So also he played at Tigres in their youth system. Went to Olympiacos in Greece. There you go, Nick. Good Greek team there. I think it's one of your teams, isn't it?
To be perfectly honest, I really don't follow the Greek league very much. But then again, if you were to follow the Greek league, there's maybe only 3 teams that are competing for the title every year. Anyway, so Olympiacos being one of them. If anyone watches any European soccer Champions League, you're definitely familiar with Olympiacos. So you know that they do assemble players from kind of all over the globe. Not as many Greek players as I think some Greeks would like to see, but the fact that he did have some time in Olympiacos shows that he can play at a top European club.
Absolutely. Johnny Russell.
Yeah, and I like what you're saying, though. As far as did they overpay, if this guy can bag another 12, 15 goals, then he's absolutely worth it. He has 12 goals in 18 appearances, like you said, in the Apertura in that half season in Liga MX. If that translates to another 12, 15 goals, I mean, he doesn't have to win the Golden Boot. He could. He could compete given his record from Mexico and what we have seen Mexican strikers do, or players who are strikers coming from Liga MX to the MLS. They break out. Before the league can catch up to them, they break out. So he could easily justify his price. And again, if SKC wants to do anything, they need to make this splash signing, and they got it done. Now go ahead. Talk about the face of the franchise, if you will, here. Johnny Russell, Mike. What's your feelings on him?
Yeah, I love this guy, man. I just love him. He's a hard worker. He's a grinder. He goes after, he plays with that intensity that, I just love to see. I'm a big hockey fan as well, and this guy kind of reminds me of a hockey player as a soccer player. He's always running after that ball. He's got an engine like no tomorrow, and he's intense as hell, and I just love it. 9 goals and 9 assists last year, 10 and 10 the year before. So definitely putting up good numbers and can score as well as feed the ball to his teammates. So that's, I love that guy's game. I think he can break out more than he already has. With Sporting Kansas City, I think he can get even better, especially if these opposing defenses are really having to focus on Alan Pulido and some of these other guys that are out there now they can't just work on Johnny Russell. They've got to spread thinner with Alan Pulido out there, because as you mentioned with Pulido, he could be in the Golden Boot race. He won the Golden Boot for the Mexican Apertura last season. So if he could do it there, he could do it here. So I think I really like this guy. I think with that intensity, it's only going to do good things for him. And that's pretty much my thoughts on him. What are your thoughts?
There were games last season where Sporting Kansas City just kind of went, here's the ball, Johnny. What can you do for us? Go make something happen. And he had to take on 2, 3, sometimes 4 defenders. And you're just not going to be able to do that. No matter who you are or what league you're in, it's really hard to take on an entire defensive line by yourself. So Russell did what he could, almost that double-double as far as goals and assists again last year. But with the added offense, it should take a little bit of the burden on him, and he can just go out and play and have fun. What he has proven, though, what I think is important to note, is because of how well he's played over the last few seasons for Sporting Kansas City, he's actually gotten called up to the Scottish national team. And I think that's something that players around the world who want to get to their national team, who want to break out on the biggest stage, have kind of said, well, the MLS isn't going to do that for me. Well, Johnny Russell is a reason to stop thinking that way. Carlos Vela kind of too. He can still have an amazing season and go play for Mexico. But Russell used his form in MLS to break into the Scottish national team, and I think a lot of players should be able to follow suit. Now, transitioning into the youngsters, this is where Sporting Kansas City has thrived over the last couple of years. A lot of young guys. I think Gianluca Buscio was even one of the youngest players ever to start a game in MLS history, or one of the youngest players to ever score a goal in MLS history. And as you know, Mike, he's getting interest from clubs like Man United, Inter Milan, Fiorentina. These are the rumors that he's going to be linked, but I agree with you. Another season in MLS is going to really do him good, help him develop a little bit more physically and develop some of the finer points of his game before he signs one of those mega contracts with a big club. So look for him to continue to grow, to continue to get some minutes. He was an excellent depth piece for Vermees last season and should continue to do that and get in some starting roles as the season continues. You also talk about Jalen Lindsey. What do you think about him?
Yeah, so 19-year-old right back. I think he's the heir apparent to Graham Zusi. He started getting playing time towards the end of last season, so I think he's definitely going to pull some minutes behind a 33-year-old Graham Zusi. The guy's not going to be able to do what he did in the past. He's not going to be able to make it through those MLS summers. You got to have some minutes from that young kid behind him. So that if they are in a playoff race, the bigger and better name than Zusi will be able to be there towards the end of the season. So I think we definitely expect to see Jalen Lindsey get some minutes there. He features regularly for the U.S. Youth National Team. So this is a guy who is right there to break out. He's young. He's got he's been groomed very well by that Sporting Kansas City youth system. So I expect to see him kind of make his way up to being an everyday type player maybe in the next season or two.
With that, our projected starting 11 in the 4-3-3 formation, Tim Melia in goal. He's not going anywhere. Barring a major injury, Melia is not going anywhere. The back line, we're projecting Dia, Beasler, Fontes, and Zusi. In the midfield, we're looking at Gutierrez, Ilya Sanchez, and Gadi Kinda. And then your three strikers up front, Daniel Shallowy, Alan Pulido, and Johnny Russell. So another great lineup on paper. Let's just see if they can stay healthy and kind of pick up and put last season behind them as just kind of the fluke.
So two notes I wanted to break out here is one, your comment about this team, this lineup on paper is fantastic. Another one. That is usually the case in the preseason when there's no injuries involved, right? Every team in MLS is going to have a really solid starting 11. It's once the injuries start happening, what does the depth look like? And I think that's the biggest piece for what's going to really set these teams apart. Secondly, as far as center backs, they are rumored to have some contact with a couple different center backs. Nothing big, not big time names like we mentioned with San Jose and Alanis. But decent signings from Europe that we might see happen here over the next few days. So there have been some rumors there. So just wanted to note that as well. We could see Beasler getting a backup or possibly somebody to take over minutes for Fontes.
So looking at the ceiling and the floor, I mean, I think the most important player, it goes without saying, Alan Pulido. We talked about how excited we were that they get this wonderful striker, and he's going to drive the best case scenario for Sporting Kansas City. If their offense is clicking, if Pulido is scoring 15, 17 goals, if Johnny Russell can pitch in another 8 to 10, and if the rest of the offense, if Kinda can get involved, if you see Zusi starting to make those runs from his wingback position and getting involved in the offense, then Kansas City is having a good season when Zusi's pushing up like that. If Beasler's pushing up like that, I think they can compete for a third spot in the Western Conference. All things aside, all things going well for Kansas City. But if they continue the same trend, if they're bit by the injury bug again, if their young players don't develop, if Alan Pulido just can't adjust to the league, to the travel, to whatever else is going on, Johnny Russell has a bit of a regression, then again, they're fighting for a playoff spot and probably not making the playoffs if they do reach the floor potential this season. And Sporting Kansas City opens up their season February 29th at Vancouver. So it'll be a good test to get some of their players acclimated, to get some of their young guys and their signings into the lineup and see how Vermees coaches in game. But we'll get our first look at Sporting Kansas City on February 29th. So, Mike, give us your final thoughts on Kansas City and wrap us up here and take us home.
Yeah, I agree 100% with Alan Pulido being the most important player. The predictions are spot on there, Nick. I think that's pretty much what we're going to see from them. And I'm interested to see that first game on February 29th against Vancouver, another revamped Western Conference side. Should be a good matchup there. Two probably level type opponents that have improved in the offseason with big striker signings. And with that, that pretty much concludes our team previews. So thanks for joining us for those.